Donald Trump is getting sued by the District Attorney of New York for fraud in property valuation in multiple properties. We're going to break down what's valid about this case, what's not valid about this case, and what's just a little bit kind of fishy all over the place. Let's go over the details. I'm TJ Kosen. Welcome to the page. We do a ton of real estate, probably more than a ton, because a ton isn't really a weight of real estate, in Texas, Florida, Georgia, California, Tennessee, and Arkansas. That's what gives us a little bit of authority to speak on this case. We're going to talk about all the different pieces. First, let's summarize the case. Second, we're going to get into valuation and comps. What's an independent valuation for a property? What's a owner-stated valuation for a property? And then we're going to talk about property taxes. Now, you might not think this is exciting, but actually in this case, property taxes are actually really, really interesting. And stick around till the end of the video because you're going to want to see a property that we own in California worth over $800,000. I would say, if I was to put it out there, if I was to be Donald Trump, I would say probably closer to $1.1 million on the actual open market. Tax assessed value, $26,000. Do you want to see how that works? Stick around to the end because that's going to be fascinating. Now, what are the details of the case? Well, the details of the case, fundamentally, which is the easiest part to understand, rely on the valuation of Mar A Lago, Donald Trump's personal residence and also resort on the beach in Florida. The judge is saying the property is worth somewhere between $18 and $27 million based on between 2011 and 2021 when they're alleging there was a defrauding of lenders going on about the property valuation. Donald Trump and the Trump organization is saying this property is worth somewhere between $400 and $600 million. Some people are saying this property might be worth as much as $1 billion, depending on how the valuation works. How can we go from $18 million valuation on a property all the way up to a potential $1 billion valuation? Well, that's what the Trump organization and that's what Donald Trump is getting sued for. Let's talk about the case. The case is a civil lawsuit. Two people over is my beautiful wife who has a master's degree in actual legal research, which is basically a master's degree in, for like a financial perspective, it would be like a master's degree in forensic accounting, more or less, from a legal perspective. So bring us through the case. Why is this a civil case as opposed to a criminal case against Donald Trump and the Trump organization?
Well, it's not a criminal case because the state isn't actually alleging that they have been violated in any way. They are bringing it to the civil realm, the realm of the people, on behalf of the lender, who is not.
So the lender's not bringing the case?
No, the lender's not bringing the case. The lender has never shown to have any issue with the valuation that they independently agreed to when the Trump organization and his lender were going through their financing process.
So I think I have a theory because what's the burden of proof for a criminal case?
The burden it's incredibly high. I mean the best example of this is OJ. Not to compare.
OJ, who is innocent, has been innocent, and will always be innocent in the eyes of the criminal court.
In the eyes of the criminal justice system.
Didn't he go to jail?
That was different. That was for stealing his own stuff.
That's for stealing his own paintings.
That's guilty in my book.
Yeah, he went to jail for stealing his Heisman back.
So yeah, the burden of proof for a criminal case.
His head off.
The burden of proof for a criminal case is beyond a reasonable doubt.
Yes.
The reasonable person is going to say, like, no, they obviously did it. Obviously, the red glove beating against the door that has DNA from OJ that doesn't fit. Well, now it doesn't fit. Now we have reasonable doubt as to why. No, it was red because it had blood on it.
Oh,
the glove itself was black.
Well, that's just morbid.
So that provides reasonable doubt. So if this case were to go to a criminal jury, I think we're going to show some reasonable doubt. But what's the burden of proof for a civil case?
It's considerably lower, as it should be, because the state isn't supposed to be in that realm.
And that's an interesting point. So burden of proof for civil is preponderance of the evidence, right? It's basically you have a scale, you have two sides that have an equal weight.
Would you say they're the scales of justice?
Yeah, Lady Liberty with the scales, is that different lady?
Different lady.
There's Justice Lady and there's Liberty Lady.
Yep.
So if the scale's like right here, you need to kind of tip the scale to have a preponderance of the evidence. So that's why OJ is guilty civilly.
Lady Liberty and Lady Justice are two different people?
One's holding the torch and the
Oh
other-
yeah,
scale.
yeah, Statue of Liberty.
Aren't
All
you
right.
from New
No,
York?
no, you're right. You're right. I was thinking about the scale bitch. I thought you were trying to say that there's two scales. I was like, are they both blindfolded?
So my theory is that the DA in this case is
Damn,
bringing.
confusing your broad.
Bro,
but
I'm
yeah,
all off,
It's a tough
sorry.
one.
My theory is the DA in this case is bringing the case civilly because the burden of proof in a civil case
Is considerably less.
considerably less
Yes.
than the burden of proof in a criminal case. So I think that's
As it's
one
supposed
point.
to be.
But let's talk about the statute that allows the case to be brought civilly from a DA, because DAs generally pursue criminal convictions
Yes, hopefully
for the
they
purpose
are.
of either financial compensation or locking someone up. In this case, a DA is pursuing a civil conviction. What's the basis of that pursuit?
I have no idea.
Yeah, I'm not really sure either. As far as I can tell, and from reading about it,
It-
so it's alleging fraud. The case is alleging fraud, and it's alleging that lenders were defrauded. So what we,
The lenders aren't saying that.
but the lenders aren't
That's the
saying
part that I don't understand is that they don't have an injured party who's coming forward, which is the basis of a civil case.
What?
Well, and generally fraud also. Fraud has to be intentional, and it has to be actual harm, generally speaking. Now, and again, I'm not an attorney, but we've done our fair share of dealing with attorneys, and we pay attorneys a lot of money to represent us in different things. It needs to generally have those couple of things, but also fraud needs to usually have the party that's hurt bring the lawsuit. So in this case, there's a New York state statute that allows the state to intervene on behalf of the alleged harmed party in order to bring a civil lawsuit more or less on their behalf. And there's some other technical details about it, but it's more or less the state is allowed to bump in here and claim fraud, even though the party that was potentially defrauded isn't claiming fraud in this case. Does that stand up constitutionally, Fourth Amendment wise, for the state? I'm not really sure.
I don't know, and I don't even know if that's ever going to be addressed
I don't think so.
in the realm of this case. In the future, probably, once people have time to see where where the chips fall.
I have another theory that in this case,
Why are you just full of them today?
no, well, I think so, because I think there's a lot of interesting things about this case that lend a little bit of credibility to the DA's accusations, but then under deeper scrutiny and under understanding the actual real estate market, because I want to look at this primarily not from a fraud perspective. I want to look at this primarily from a real estate market perspective and from a properties perspective, because I think that's what's really interesting. And that's where we can shed some light on how is property valuation actually pursued in both the commercial and residential field, and why a fraud allegation is problematic when someone is puffing up, which is what the allegation is, puffing up values on a property, both in a specific instance of why that's problematic and more broadly why that's an issue in the marketplace. And where we actually have seen legit fraud in the marketplace and how to identify legit fraud from a property valuation perspective.
Well, I think from a property valuation, from a strictly real estate perspective, I think the case has even less of a leg to stand on.
Well, let's get into the real estate. So,
Real quick, before we jump into it, just because
Yeah.
I have a question. How is New York involved, right? We're talking about a property in Florida. So how all of a sudden is New York getting involved?
so this is where, in my opinion, where potentially someone can allege fraud, even from a valuation perspective, is we're using a balance sheet perspective from the borrower. So Donald Trump or the Trump organization is the borrower that has control of or ownership of multiple subsidiary assets. So we have Mar A Lago, we have Trump Tower in New York, we have some hotels in Vegas, and we're going to put all that together and call it a balance sheet, which is fine, that's fair. And then balance sheet is assets minus liabilities. And the problem with the balance sheet is it's subjective because it's a current snapshot of current valuation that changes with marketplace fluctuations, but also it's a guess. What does my personal house sell for if I were to put it on the open market? I don't know. For my balance sheet, I'm going to make an educated guess as to the current valuation of my house and my rental properties when the bank says, well, what's your balance sheet look like? So it goes to accounting, which is a little bit, is there cash accounting, is there accrual accounting, is there cost basis accounting? What a lender is going to look at is what is my current net worth with current valuations on my current assets into my balance sheet, and then how do I use that as collateral for this other thing that I'm buying over here? So it's basically, it's not a portfolio loan, but it's looking at a holistic picture of all the different pieces of property. And that's where you can potentially, I suppose, lie about these three assets over here. The bank doesn't look at those three assets too much over here because fundamentally they're lending on this asset over here. So that's where the fraud allegation potentially has some actual legs to stand on the part of the DA. But I think we're going to talk about with comps and valuation and especially tax assessment, why that argument isn't the strongest. Now, my personal opinion is, with this case, with this judge, with this DA, who's going to win this case, in your opinion?
Honestly, no one. I think it's just going to be kicked down through appeal and
But
postponement.
this case in
and-
front of this judge with this DA, like this case, before appeals,
Oh, the state's going to win.
the state's going to win.
Yeah.
The state's going to win. Nick?
Witch hunt.
Well, okay, but I'm talking specifically this case, this judge, this DA, outside of appeals, outside of,
And the sad
going to
thing,
the district
there's
court.
not even a jury on this. It is 100%
I don't-
the judge, isn't it?
So, in a case like this, you can generally, as the defendant, request a jury trial if you want to. Donald Trump did not request a jury trial. I think that's interesting. I think that means that he doesn't care if he wins or loses this case, because I think he knows that the outcome of this case with this judge and potentially a jury that, let's be honest, the prosecution gets to pick as well as the defense does, he's not going to win.
Yep.
And with the preponderance of the evidence versus an overwhelming burden of guilt, I think he knows he's going to lose this, and I think his objective is to lose this as quickly as possible so they can get moved up to the appellate level where it gets a different judge. And I think it potentially goes to the Supreme Court, although it really shouldn't, but because of who we're talking about and who we're dealing with, I think it potentially goes there. Let's talk about comps. Because there's different types of comps. A comp is, for the broker in the room, what's a comp?
It's a comparable property. So you're hopefully looking at apples to apples to get a valuation on your subject property. So in this case, it's the entirety of the Mar A Lago estate, which is not an easy thing to comp.
So you're not comparing this to single-family residential properties in the neighborhood?
I mean, I wouldn't, but that's me.
Yeah.
Okay.
A
Every broker-
judge from New York, though.
Yeah, every broker does their CMA's comparative market analysis differently.
So on the base level, a comp is a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house in a homogeneous subdivision that looks like another 3-bedroom, 2-bath house that's similarly updated.
Yes.
So that's ideally a comp. Now this gets more difficult in commercial, because how do I comp a Trump Tower to
A bodega.
to a Hilton hotel?
Well, I mean, are you going to use your points as part of your?
Well, you're probably going to, do you get Trump points? You're probably going to use an income approach, right, for valuation.
Yeah.
You're probably going to use
income-
market-based size,
That's a huge part of it.
square footage,
Neighborhood
neighborhood.
as well.
So there's going to be overriding factors when you talk about comps. But what's a lender going to look like if they're lending on something like Mar A Lago? So I'm going to be Donald Trump. I'm going to say Mar A Lago is worth $1 billion. Mr. Lender, you're going to come back and say
It's worth 18 million.
18 million. Well, and the lender, at least in this case, is maybe going to agree with what the Trump organization actually says, which is about, what, 400 to
I
600
said
million.
425 to 612.
Their first answer would be, we're going to get a third-party eye, right? We're going to get a completely third-party, non-biased opinion on it.
Right.
And
which
go
is
from there.
Even in residential, that's why we have appraisers. That's why you don't get to just assign your appraiser.
So am I committing fraud from the lender?
Probably.
It-
Oh.
Am I committing fraud from the lender if I have a rental property, a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house? The lender asks me, as part of the pre-qualification process, A, I'm not under oath, and B, I'm dealing with a civil individual, and the lender asks me, Mr. Kosen, I'm going to refinance this property. What do you think it's worth? I'm going to say, it's worth about 500 grand. Even if I know it's worth 300 grand, or even if I know I could sell it on the market right now at 325, am I committing fraud if I tell the lender at that point, it's probably worth about 500 grand? No, I don't think so. Because,
And
That's your
why,
opinion.
That's your opinion.
Yeah, you're allowed your opinions.
okay,
Yeah.
so what's the lender going to do?
They're going to hire an appraisal company.
A third party to
Unbiased.
verify it. And they're
So-
going to come back and say, you're an asshole, it's only 300, not 500.
So maybe one step farther, and the lender's going to be right. The lender's probably going to be right because they're going to use comps in the area, and they're going to. What's the lender's risk mitigation? Because we've been in a fantastic market where we're going up in prices, and now we're stabilizing and drifting down in some areas. But what's the lender's primary concern regarding this property?
That you're going to be over leveraged on it.
Yeah.
And it's them giving you the money for it.
Yeah, the lender's giving. I think that's right. The lender wants to manage their risk. It's in the lender's best interest to manage their risk based on the fundamentals of the property. So
Yeah,
the
be
lender's
more
gonna-
conservative.
The lender, in this case, is going to qualify the property. And that's hard maybe for some people to understand because in the residential space, if I'm buying a house, the lender's fundamentally qualifying me as the borrower in my ability to repay on the property itself.
But even in the residential side, they're still going to qualify the property. That's a huge part of it. How many times in the last year especially have we heard of properties being their appraisal value is, 20, 30, 40, sometimes $50,000 below what was offered because the lender's looking real time at what the market is doing.
No, that's a good point. And we've seen it in the run-up. We've seen it in our business. We've bought a property at, say, 200 grand. We put 30K into it, on the low end, I suppose. But whatever, use it as a basic example. And then we listed on the market for 300 grand, and we think that's a healthy profit. And we get offers at 320, 330, 335. I think our record was 40K over ask on one property. And that was a strategy on our part in terms of listing, but also it's just what the market's doing. And the lender then is going to come in and be like, is it actually worth 340? And we had several times where the appraisal didn't match the actual contract offering price. And then either the buyer brings the difference or we discount the price. Or I suppose we can try to get a different appraisal. But we know that that's probably pushing on the valuation. So it's the lender's job to kind of have some realityville in the situation, like maybe bring it back down to reality.
Well, it's not just their job, it's their responsibility. Because the lenders, for the most part, aren't lending their own money. They have to put other money to work. They have insurance companies who, borrow against the claims and are putting all that money to work. That's the way that money works. So it's entirely their responsibility to whoever they're getting the actual loan value from to make sure that it's actually worth it when they put it to work.
They have a responsibility, absolutely, to make sure they're doing the right due diligence.
So how do you defraud a lender? Like how, if I wanted to, this isn't a how-to course.
This is not a class.
This isn't a class on how to. If I wanted to defraud a lender, coming from a commercial real estate background, I have a couple theories on how I can defraud a lender. And I think it's a bad idea, and I think you can get locked up for it. And
Can you
so
say
we're not
that
going
to
to
the
do it.
camera? That I would never.
I would never get caught defrauding a lender. But so I don't know if you can with something like Mar A Lago, because I think the lender is going to be so conservative with their valuation when they go to give you a loan that it's going to be based on the income potential and existing income of the property as is. It's going to be based on a risk assessment of the likelihood of that income continuing going forward. And then I think it's also going to be based on what the perception of the open market valuation of that property is. And I think they're going to lean most heavily on the income as is and the income going forward. Because we're not alleging a fraud in like a value add on the property. So fraud on value add I think is actually pretty easy. Let's take a...
And pretty common.
And pretty common. Like this is where I see a lot of fraud in the commercial real estate space. And we're not even alleging defrauded borrowers that were not borrowers. We're not even alleging, on the Trump case, we're not alleging defrauded investors that invested in this property based on puffed up numbers. That might be a case. And we've seen that where I've seen PPMs in this marketplace when I'm scratching my head going like, I don't understand the valuation they're putting at the end value of this property once they do a minimal value add on this commercial property. Then, is that a fraud situation? I don't know, but it's easier fraud to show that, hey, I tried to get a bunch of investor money to put on this property over here that I'm going to get benefit for, even if there's a lender that wasn't defrauded. And then I miss on that valuation because I'm either negligent or incompetent.
So to break that down, what you're saying is like, let's say I had a multifamily property, it's 100 units. If you're saying on my PPM, if I'm going to give it to you as a lender, if I'm saying, hey, I'm going to go in there, put in new linoleum, put in some microwaves, paint it white, and that's going to bring the value up threefold.
Double the value.
Yeah, right.
Double the value.
That's where the fraud would be, right? Because those improvements aren't actually pushing the envelope.
What I'm saying in that
Right.
case, so what I'm saying in that case actually is I think you're not defrauding the lender at that point.
Okay.
In my opinion, I think the lender is still going to do their own valuation. When we were doing the properties in Memphis, for example, we had an incredibly low operating cost because we didn't have a management company. We had direct employees. We paid well, but we paid without a management company barrier. We got materials cheaper than almost anyone else in town, including management companies, because of our volume. And so we had a lower per unit operating cost than pretty much all of our competition. And we told that to the bank. We showed them our books, we showed them our accounting, we showed them our pay stubs to our employees, all the stuff. And they came back and they said, in this marketplace, your cost per unit should be $3,300, and we were showing our cost per unit annualized was about $3,000. 10% difference. It's not big, but 10% in a 100-unit property, even a 10 cap, is still $1 million. So so the lender said, well, we're gonna underwrite this deal based on an average per unit annual cost of either 33, this is years ago, $3,300 or $3,500.
So they were hedging their bets in the higher number, right? They
Yeah.
were saying, you can do it cheaper, great, but we're going to take into account a higher, just in case you can't do it.
Right, and I literally experienced this, and we said to the lender, okay, that's an extra buffer, that's cool, like, that's fine. Maybe we missed. Maybe we're not taking out enough capital expense in our reserve account. Maybe we're not anticipating enough increase in the property tax based on what we're doing with this property. So we told the lender, cool, let's sign the docs, let's refi. Like, we don't care. So the lender hedged their bets in that case. Where could I have defrauded in that situation, I think, is if we'd had third-party investment money and we'd underwritten it at, say, $2,200 a unit expense. So average unit expense, we're gonna say to own 100 units, my average expense per unit, not counting debt service, is gonna say average, let's go $3,500 a year to hold this property in operational expense and property taxes and insurance and payroll and gardening and reserve accounts. And that was good at the time, I guess. I'm gonna go and raise money from third-party investors and say, hey, investors, I'm not gonna tell you, because I have a private placement PPM, I don't need to tell you what the average is in the submarket, but I'm gonna say I can manage this property at $2,500 a unit average expense before debt service. That's rock star, let's go. It's awesome. Take all my money. There's no due diligence necessarily that end investor is gonna be able to do or know how to do if they're not familiar with that submarket and that type of property. The lender is going to know, but the investor that's giving me $100,000 to go put in this property, they're not gonna know that. They're already accredited. They're just gonna rely on the PPM and my vision statement for the property. I think there's a bigger case for defrauding that investor than there is for defrauding that lender. So who's alleging that in the Trump case?
Nobody.
No one.
Yeah, no one.
Because there's non-investors, right, in this? He was doing a portfolio loan in a sense, right, of his business?
Yeah, for the most part. What do you gotta add?
No, I mean, just that. It's all based on, sorry, I keep pointing to the article over here. It's all based on the Trump Organization portfolio analysis, of which Mar A Lago is like
A big chunk.
That's a big piece.
It's a huge
Yeah.
part of
It's
it.
a big piece. He bought it for a good price.
What? So, the Mar A Lago, I think it says up there, right? It's scroll down a little, Tommy, or up. It's 62,000 square feet. Scroll down, right there. It's 62,500 square feet mansion on 20 acres. Right?
Built in, so let's read the...
in Palm Beach.
The property isn't currently listed for sale, obviously, and they don't plan on selling it ever, which it's a trophy property. It's one of the first ones, if you read the art of the deal, it's one of the first ones that he bought. The 62,500, that's pretty specific, square foot mansion built in 1927 in the style of Mediterranean palaces with a splendid Art Deco interior, sits on 20 acres of pampered property spanning the width of Palm Beach.
So it's like a listing write-up.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah.
Well, it's Zero Hedge, so we're reading from the Zero Hedge article, and we'll put the link to the article in the description below. He put it under a conservation easement in '02. It prohibits him from further developing it, and I think that might speak about the property tax discrepancy that we're going to talk about. Well, that's not, I think, that means exactly the next sentence is, in exchange, he pays lower taxes on it. So I want to finish the conversation, part 3, with the property tax issue, because I want to bring up some good examples on property taxes and how that works with commercial properties. Because there is a lot of value to having a lower property tax for a trophy commercial property in certain areas. So I want to talk about that. But let's talk a little bit, Babe, you did some research on the listing agent of similar properties. Scroll down, because Trump had an let's see, the judge. So Mr. Monson is Moens?
Moens.
Mr. Moens, he's a broker in the area who gave a opinion as to the valuation of the property. So the judge picked on this. He said the judge picked on Mr. Moens' word choice, saying that obviously this court cannot consider an expert affidavit I'm not sure why, because expert witnesses are all the time considered in terms of weighing the likelihood of evidence being valid.
Yeah, it's kind of in the name.
Yeah, so the judge and the court cannot consider an expert affidavit that's based on unexplained and unsubstantiated dreams. So basically what we're saying is we can't value Mar A Lago at more than
They call it 18, right?
18 to
million.
23, 27 million, 28 million,
Mm-hmm.
based on dreams. Let's talk about this expert witness who
Mm-hmm.
isn't qualified to testify as to property values. What does his current listing portfolio look like?
Well, it's a lot in Palm Beach. He's definitely what I would consider a luxury broker.
And a luxury neighborhood-specific
Yes.
expert.
Yeah, most of his listings are on either South Ocean Boulevard or North Ocean Boulevard,
And
which is just that huge swath
a
that
huge
makes
swath.
up Palm Beach.
What does Mar A Lago sit on? Does it sit on Ocean Boulevard?
It is on Ocean Boulevard.
it
I
is.
think it might be on North Ocean. But either way, it's just that huge strip of well, actually not a
It's
huge
its
strip
own
of land.
island.
It's its own
literally
island, yeah.
island. You have to take a bridge to get to it.
Isthmus is a bridge. It's connected.
I thought an
The bridge
isthmus had
doesn't
to
I
be
don't know.
connected with
I actually
actual
don't know if Palm
land.
Beach. I don't even know if Palm Beach is an actual island or if it's a.
You just
No,
mentioned
no,
it. Do
it's
you even know what an
island.
isthmus
You have
is?
to get to it. You have to take it.
Yeah, it's like like a peninsula of land that comes out into the water. All right. So on the screen we have a 2.2. So Mar A Lago is 20 acres. And listing comps, we all know listing comps are to a certain extent wishes and dreams. But what we're talking about is a discrepancy of 18 million to 600 million purchase price.
That's
or
a big dream.
dream
Yeah.
on Mar A Lago versus what's up here. We have 2.2 acres of undeveloped land on Ocean Boulevard for 100. What does that say, Nick?
150 million. Oh, sorry, Nick.
150.
150 million. I mean, that's more than 28.
That's a lot of dreams.
It hasn't sold yet, and we didn't. I don't think we pulled sold listings. It's simply an area where stuff doesn't change hands that much if it's huge development potential, because it takes a lot of money to get in there and do it. So where is the discrepancy? What's the judge relying on to make his determination about this fraud allegation?
I don't know what comps they used, what comps the states used for it, in terms of like what the property tax records are showing, because I can't look that up. But any brokers in Florida who did, I would love to see them.
Yeah, hey guys, if you're watching this video and you're a Florida broker and have comps that they're using that validate the purchase price or the allegation of price on Mar A Lago, drop them down there.
Yeah,
Because if you
comments
guys
below.
find 20 acres in Palm Beach for sale for $18 million, honestly, hit us up. We'll buy it tomorrow.
We can JV on it.
Yeah, we'll JV.
Yeah.
We'll split it with you, 50-50. We'll see how it goes. But so let's go to the property tax issue, because I think we have two different issues about property tax. We have property tax at purchase price, which is one thing we're going to bump into in California. We're going to end with a really interesting example in California about a property tax assessment on a value on a property. But we also have commercial property tax valuation versus residential property tax valuation versus, in this case, Donald Trump putting this in a conservation easement for the intention of decreasing property tax liability. Nick, do I want to pay as an investor, a real estate investor? I'm not talking about my fair share. I'm talking about as an individual, TJ Kosen. Do I want to pay more taxes or do I want to pay less taxes?
Less.
Would it be reasonable to assume, in my opinion, in your opinion, that someone like Donald Trump would want to have a greater tax liability or a lesser tax liability?
Less.
Would it be reasonable to assume that someone who's worth somewhere between, now we're going to talk puff numbers, he thinks he's worth 10 billion, Forbes thinks he's worth 3, let's split the difference and say he's worth only 2.
I'll take one.
Someone's worth $1 billion running for office, is he going to cross his T's and dot his I's with paying what his legal obligation is for taxes, or is he going to pull some shady shit and try to pay less taxes?
Pretty sure he's going to be paying taxes.
Okay,
Full and full.
I think that's fair. Like I think the IRS would audit us if they thought we were doing something wrong. I think when you work on that scale, I think you pretty much get audited every year because the IRS is watching you because you're worth $1 billion to $10 billion depending on.
If he's been this wrong for this long, right, then you're talking about an Epstein level of corruption because he's been covering it for so long. But he hasn't, right? Again, nobody throughout the entire time, all of his years of filing taxes, did nobody say, hey, this is way off, right? This is only 18 million, not 600.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about property taxes. Bring up the link list again. So there's property taxes for single-family residents, and there's property taxes for commercial property. And underneath the commercial property, I think there's property taxes for homogeneous commercial property in a commercial property area, and there's property taxes for outliers in a different type of area. So what do I mean by that? I mean, if I have an apartment complex and an industrial warehouse and a strip center, that's all going to be different types of properties, but they're all going to be fairly comparable, more or less, right? If I have an apartment complex and an apartment complex, we're going to have two very similar properties. They're going to be taxed very similarly based on the income and based on the condition. Mm-hmm. If I have an apartment complex and I have 20 acres of beachfront property in Palm Beach, that's going to be very different. Okay, and that's hard to conceptualize. Well, that means Donald Trump's not paying his fair share. And that might or might not be the case, I don't know. That's for the taxing authority to say. But what we're going to say is, what happens if I have a golf course in $1 million neighborhood? What's my golf course taxed at? And what's my $1 million house taxed at next to the golf course? I think this is really interesting. So I want to pull up Gleneagles Country Club in Plano, Texas, which is, it's a higher end country club. I like to think so. I mean, they let some deadbeats in, like my wife and I.
It's not Palm Beach, but
it's not Palm
nice.
Beach.
Yeah.
It is nice.
We'll put some pictures up here.
The ocean sucks.
It
The
looks very
ocean's
nice.
The view is trash.
You can read some of the details on this, right?
Yeah.
The DBA name, Gleneagles Country Club.
Mm-hmm.
Total land area, what do we have there?
1.9 million square feet.
That's relatively good size, I think. Total improvement, main area, I think that's probably the square footage of the property.
That's got to be the square footage of the
Clubhouse is probably that,
clubhouse,
plus
yeah.
the extra stuff. How big is that?
Just over 78,000.
So pretty good size, right? Gleneagles Country Club,
It's
Black
marked
Lot
as
18. There's actually a couple
commercial,
lots, but we're just going to deal with the main lot under this thing. Tommy, let's scroll down and see the 2023 valuation of this property.
That's total assessed value.
Total assessed value, I can't quite see it from here. What does that say?
9 million.
Okay, so what's their property tax liability on 9 million? What's their actual property tax bill? 2023, babe, improvement value is what number?
That is
8.5
8.5 million.
8.5 million. So that means that the structures on this property are worth $8.5 million. So with the clubhouse, there's a tennis court room, there's the pool, there's
They're not counting the dirt.
they're not counting the dirt.
Okay.
What's the dirt value of this property that the city of Plano is putting on this property?
528.
528,000.
Wow, that sounds, let's see if we can buy that, right?
Yeah.
Is that legit? Well, what does it do? What is a 36-hole golf course, 2 golf courses, in some of the primest real estate in Plano, Texas? And what does that do to all the surrounding property values around there? Does it
increases them.
Hopefully,
Hopefully,
drive
yeah.
them up.
It hopefully drives them up,
increase
yeah.
them.
So let's summarize Gleneagles. 36-hole golf course. In some respects, it is like Plano's equivalent to being comparable to Mar A Lago in a lot of respects.
In their minds, yeah.
And in Plano's mind, maybe, yeah, it's probably a little different valuation. I wouldn't say that it's probably worth 600 million,
No.
but it's probably worth well in excess of the dirt value being
Actually,
appraised.
this is probably closer to the 18 million.
Yeah, it's probably worth 18 to 25 million, somewhere in there. I don't know. I'm sure Club Corps, when they got the loan on it, I'm sure they had an independent valuation of what
Absolutely.
it brings in based on cash flow.
Yeah.
But back to the commercial thing, let's pull up a property that overlooks the King's Course, my favorite course at Gleneagles, that overlooks the course, a single family residence on what, less than an acre?
0.72.
So 0.72 acres overlooking the King's Course. We can flip through the pictures and get a picture of overlooking the Fairway. It's a very nice house. Listed at $6 million. So I can buy this house at $6 million overlooking the golf course, or I can buy
always
the
wanted 2 islands.
entire golf
Double
course
island.
for $9 million. Which one am I going to do?
How much do you like to golf? I mean,
I might just buy the house.
yeah.
I was about to say, the house is less maintenance.
The house is less maintenance, yeah, less landscapers, less gardeners. So what are we
Yeah,
showing?
it just keeps going, right?
What are we showing with these examples? We're
Oh
showing.
my God!
Oh, it's a nice house.
Bro, I didn't even care for the garage is what's solid. That sold me right there.
So this is a
Looks
very
like horse stables.
it's a very nice house. But what we're doing property tax wise, and this is what the judge's case is. They say the property tax assessment on Mar A Lago is based on a somewhere in the, let's say $25 million valuation. Mr. Trump, you're saying your property's worth $400 million. The article even says that Trump says maybe it's worth as much as $1.5 billion. Based on a strictly square footage approach from some of the neighboring properties that are listed for sale, I think $1 billion might actually be kind of defensible. But what we're showing here is like specialty commercial property, like a golf course, like at a resort, is going to get preferential property tax treatment. Not because that they want to make the rich man richer, and actually quite the opposite. Not that they want to make the rich man richer and give preferential treatment to the owner of the resort, but because that resort, because that golf course, because that thing actually inflates the property values, therefore making the richer men that live around the country club actually poorer because they're paying more in property taxes. But it inflates these values. So what the cities and municipalities do is they basically, sorry, I was reading that again. Oh, there's the taxes. Okay. So what the cities and municipalities do is basically drive up the cost of the competing properties by keeping the luxury property, the golf course, the park, the resort, at a lower property tax basis. Is that fair? I don't know. Is that legal? It happens all the time.
Yeah.
So up here we have the property taxes on Gleneagles Country Club. $52,000 is what Gleneagles paid in.
That's the property.
No,
That's
no,
that
this
house.
is for that
Oh, my bad.
house.
That house
That's
paid
$6
$6
million
$52,000
house. Yeah.
to
Okay,
live on.
so let's extrapolate.
Yeah.
This house, I think we paid more than $52,000 in property tax some years. That house, $6 million, $52,000 in property tax. Let's add 30% to that. So what is that? $65 million. $65,000 is what Gleneagles probably pays in property taxes.
Yeah. I didn't see, when we had their tax record up before, I didn't see any like ag exemptions.
Yeah,
or
any
anything
exemptions.
Like
They're
that.
not going to have eggs, and they're already getting the preferential treatment.
Well, I mean, they have to keep a certain amount of it treed. So,
True. So what's our average? I wonder what's like a high bill for us at the club on a month? Like maybe we had so we had a monthly event, we had a networking event, we had our dues, we had drinks, we had pool. What would be a high bill for us at the club?
7.
7,000.
Yeah.
What's 7 times 12?
You do the math.
I don't know. It's somewhere over 70. Because 7 times 10 is
That's
70.
70, yeah.
So we probably pay all of Gleneagles' property tax bill just with what we pay on a high month worth of dues.
Oh, mad.
Now, yeah, I am a little upset actually. We need decreased dues.
Yeah.
I'm gonna start hitting more fat shots and just taking out.
So our
for you.
grass.
the haters
You're doing your
online.
part.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're doing a long video. Fuck it. We'll post most of this, Tommy, instead of editing out a lot of it because this is actually interesting content. Now, the haters online, you guys out there who want to validate your opinions in the comments below, are going to say that we're cherry picking a couple of examples to prove a point, and this isn't extrapolating over like a broader marketplace. And we're only picking 2 states. We're picking Texas and Florida. Now we're going to wrap up the video with another example in California of how property taxes work to show and illustrate that property taxes really are a municipality and a state and a location specific issue. But while you're down there validating your wrong opinions in the comments, and if you happen to agree with our opinions while you're in the comments, don't forget to smash the like button, hit the subscribe button, and turn on the notifications so you can get more fantastic content like this. Let us know down there, but what do you think? Do you think property taxes are fundamentally fair? I already paid for the property, I already paid the bank, and now I'm paying the government for the privilege of renting a property that I technically own from the government? Or are property taxes just another aspect of making sure that the rich pay as much of their fair share as you can squeeze out of them, because a country club should be paying property taxes the same as a residential property next door, and Donald Trump is defrauding, well, not just the lenders, but the state government by not paying his fair share in taxes? Let us know what you think in the comments below. Let's talk about one more example in California about property taxes to wrap up this video. So California's fun. They don't do a lot right with tax policy, in my opinion. Babe, do you know much about the history of Prop 13? Nick, I would ask you, but I'm pretty sure you know nothing about Prop 13.
I remember it going through when I was in middle school.
Oh, I think I went through before that. No, I went through way before that. Might be talking about Prop 8. Might be talking about the No Hate for 8.
Do you have a loan on this?
Yeah.
Yeah,
You're
but you
welcome.
didn't do it.
Yeah,
No,
you
I
didn't.
know. Well, because the square footage is so small, I'm shocked, right?
It
That
feels even smaller inside.
It's very small, yeah.
Yeah.
most
So-
lenders have like a 500 minimum. So
This
four.
is so close to the water.
This has a conventional line.
All right,
No,
yeah,
this has a conventional
Oh,
line.
conventional.
Yeah. So California has Prop 13. Florida has different, obviously, preferential treatment for some commercial properties. Florida also has Everglades, it has wetlands, it has swampland.
Gators.
So there's probably a lot of property tax issues in Florida that we don't know anything about.
Gators will drive
But-
down your property taxes.
Gators do drive down your values. California has Prop 13. So Proposition 13 was passed, I think in the 70s actually, as a way to lock in the property tax basis at the purchase price with minimum increases to the property taxes. Property tax can only go up a certain percentage each year from the baseline property tax.
So you're pretty much getting grandfathered in to your taxes when you
Effectively.
purchase it.
So Texas, that's different from a Texas homestead,
Oh, yeah.
where I buy a Texas property and the tax assessment, if I'm homestead, it can only go up, they can only increase the value of the property by a certain percent per year. So that's a lot different than California with Prop 13, where they says I can only increase my property taxes by a certain percent each year. They recently amended Prop 13, either, I'm not sure if it was through the legislature or through a ballot initiative, to make it no longer be able to be passed down generationally, which is interesting. We'll talk about that in a second. And to have it, well, with a caveat. So it used to be, my great-grandpa bought a piece of property in California for $1,000. My property tax basis is based on that $1,000 purchase price plus the increase in the property tax per year. So at the time, $1,000, the property tax would be like 10 bucks. Maybe it was 100 years ago. Well, they're increasing it maybe 3% of that 100 bucks each year. Of the 10 bucks. So
Yep.
they're increasing it 3% of the 10 bucks each year until now. So whatever that like amortizes out to, that's what I'm paying in property taxes on that property that my great-grandpa bought 100 years ago. Now, that changed with the new amendment to Prop 13. Is that good? Is that bad? I'm not sure. California does have some preferential property tax treatment. Texas, on the other hand, at an average of 2.5% to 3.5% annualized property taxes with no caps. I don't want to get it into is that fair argument. It just is what it is. The law is what it is until someone pushes to change the law. This property in California is about 3 blocks from the beach on Sunset Cliffs. So actually that drives down the value, in my opinion, because Sunset Cliffs is a very busy road in Ocean Beach. Redfin has the estimate at $863,191. Nick, you pointed out, what's the square footage
It's
of
a
this?
442 square foot property.
Now, I'm going
This
to
is an apartment.
it's no shared walls. No shared walls.
No, it's a standalone.
No, it's a
standalone
standalone house, but that is the size of
Yeah.
like a New York flat, right?
Yeah. So it's a 1 bedroom, 1 bath. I'm going to say that if we were to put this on the open market, it would likely sell in a completely fixed up condition for in excess of $1.1 million. Likely. Now,
Just wondering, right? Would that be bulldozed and then rebuilt, or
so a couple.
you said remodeled, so I'm assuming somebody's going to go in there and live in that from that, right?
So it's currently occupied. It would probably need some updating to get there, and it's zoned such that it has excess capacity on the lot. So the lot's relatively small, but you can build something pretty big on the lot because of a zoning overlay. So it's actually a little bit more desirable piece of dirt than just a standard residential lot in San Diego.
The lot's actually pretty deep.
And the lot's not
No,
bad
it's a good
sized.
size.
The lot's not bad sized. Next door is a 2-story, actually 3-story because they put a basement below it. So it's a 3-story vacation rental house. So we have like a hybrid commercial zoning in the area. So it could be a storefront, it could be a shop, it could be a bunch of different things. That makes it more desirable. It's obviously used for residential space right now. Let's scroll down to the property tax assessment. There we go. So this is really interesting. What does it have for 2008 as far back as we go? Assessed value is what?
18 grand.
Land value is
I don't know. There's a camera in front of it.
13,257. Addition value is 5,700. We can't do a bathroom for $5,000 that I know of.
Not a nice one.
Not a nice one.
Not an indoor one.
So the total assessed value 18. The total property taxes in 2008, $232. So am I outing myself? Yes, I'm outing myself. I'm saying we own this property with my family at an insanely low property tax basis. As an investor, is it my job to pay more or less taxes? It's my job to pay less taxes. Is that fair?
Yes.
Is it legal? Yes.
Well, I think if anyone had seen the state of the property in 2008, they would agree with that valuation.
In 2008, this property was worth approximately $300,000 after the crash. maybe I might even say as low as 250. So even though our basis here is 10% of that at 18,000, it's not this egregious. At
Why are
2008.
your taxes so low, right? If you were grandfathered in because your parents bought the property?
My
and-
grandparents bought this
Yeah,
property.
that's what, all right.
So here's where it gets to the fairness issue, because you're going to go up to 2019. What does 2019 assessed value say?
It says 642,000.
So 2020 property taxes went up 2,500%, 2,500% to a property tax liability of what?
For in 2020?
Yes.
$7,900.
And then assessed value went back down from $642,000 back to what level in 2020?
22,000.
22,000. What happened in 2019 that caused my property taxes to go up 2,500%? And what happened in 2021 that allowed my property taxes to decrease by 96.1%?
You had a slight change in ownership.
We had a slight change in ownership. My
Yes.
mom died.
Yes.
It's very sad. It didn't make her day. It didn't make my day. Didn't make the family's day.
I think it's a general theme that it wasn't a good day.
Made the tax appraiser's day.
I was waiting for that. I was
Yeah.
hoping I wouldn't have to say that
Yeah.
myself. It made the property tax assessor's day. Like, holy crap, this is awesome.
Yeah, Obie's getting a new library off that one.
We're going to increase the property taxes 2,500%, 2020. What did we do in 2020?
Put in a trust.
We put it in a trust, and we were able to roll back the taxes back to the 2018 level plus the what would have been assessed
Like
going
the
forward.
natural progression.
Right. What also happened in the laws of
Did
California?
you get a refund?
Yes.
Oh, that's even bigger kick in the dick.
So-
to them. Fuck you.
Probably. So we made a math calculation in this case. We made a business calculation as a family. We said we want to keep this property. Now, what does this property rent for? Not that much. It rents for like $2,000. So is it economically beneficial to keep a property if your only valuation is like maximizing cash flow? Do I want to keep $1 million property rented for $2,000? No, I want to sell the property and deploy the capital somewhere else. The property has sentimental value. It's worth more to us. My brother's living there because my grandpa bought it when he moved to California, whenever it was in the late 40s or early 50s. So we have sentimental attachment to this property. We're not trying to maximize our money in because we're not just greedy. We actually have feelings.
And also, if you turn around and you sell it, right, you have just those additional tax implications, right? Like, you're going to be selling a property for 1.2, you're thinking that you're going to have to pay taxes on.
Well, my tax basis on the property is going to be right around $600,000 to $700,000 because when someone dies, the valuation for inheritance or for capital gains is assessed at the date of death, at the date of new ownership. So my basis on the property is going to be right around that 650 to 750 range at the time of death if I were to sell. So my gain would be the excess above that, net of costs. So what we did was in this particular case, we made a business decision as the family where we said, okay, we're going to pay some attorneys about $20,000 to go through probate, to go through the paperwork, because this property is actually still in my grandparents' name, in their trust. My mom was the beneficiary of that, and therefore she would inherit this when they died. My grandma died in 2006. My mom died in 2019. So it went to her, but then she never took it out of the trust to be distributed to us. So where does it go in testate? It goes to the heirs of her exclusively. So it goes to her 4 children because it was from her mom and dad. Her dad died. Her mom inherited 100%. Her mom died. She inherited 100%. It's separate property from her husband, my dad. So it goes directly to the 4 kids that she has, even with my dad. That's how it goes in California through probate. So we paid an attorney $20-something thousand to square all that out. And that allowed us to roll back the taxes to the 2018 tax basis plus 2 years of increase in the property tax. Interesting story, California also amended the law, and we were like right in that time frame. They amended the Prop 13 where that wouldn't be able to happen now because you have to have the heir of the property live in the property to assume the old tax basis. So would it apply to us? I'm not sure because my brother's actually living in the house now. So since one of the heirs is living in there, maybe we would be able to assume the property tax basis, maybe we wouldn't, I'm not sure. So what's the takeaway from this? What's yours? Back to the Trump case.
Oh, I was like, oh, takeaway is get all that set up before you die.
That's for sure. That's one takeaway.
No more buying in California.
I mean, I would buy a bunch of these properties at
Back in the day.
Again,
Yeah.
I said at 2008, this property is probably worth about 250 to 325-ish, somewhere in there at the bottom of the market when the market just plummeted. That might be a little low, I'm not sure. So the case of that is, I think, buy everything you can when the market plummets.
Yep.
I think the Trump case was at $20 million. Buy as many Mar A Lagos as you possibly can.
I'll take 10.
What did I say? I said on my notes, at $20 million, I would buy one a day in that area for as long as I could in Palm Beach. Babe,
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to get a little bit of a discount on it, but, you know,
you know, buy for 19.
beggars can't be choosers.
The judge was saying that it was a, what do you call it, a pipe dream?
That the estimate was based on dreams.
Yeah, the estimates are based on dreams because he's comparing it, right, to
Vacant land.
To vacant land.
What are houses called?
But you can't, right? If Trump went and said, hey, I want to sell Mar A Lago, you know in a heartbeat there is some rich oil guy from Middle East that'll just buy it, right?
He might not pay $1 billion.
It doesn't.
He might not pay
That's my
500.
point,
He might
right?
not pay
So,
500 million.
He
But-
will find a buyer for that quickly.
Right.
Right. That property sitting for 2 million. You know, the 2-acre property sitting for 90 days. That's because you can find land available on Palm Beach. So who's in a rush to go out there and build?
I don't want to get into politics of the situation. I don't want to go too much into the judge's motivation. But what I do want to say is if I was on one of the cases in Georgia or Florida about the election thing, which is a completely different issue, that maybe has some merit, probably doesn't, but I think this case is a distraction from that. And I would actually be pissed if I was prosecution on this. Because if they have a good case against Mr. Trump and the Trump organization with election fraud or with documents that were in the basement, you know, not the garage, that's Joe Biden, that's different, whatever. But if they have an actual case of something else, and here's the thing, if Trump did something wrong, that should be judged based on the wrongness of the thing, regardless of someone else doing something wrong over here. So maybe there's 2 tiers, maybe there's not, I think there probably is. But I would be pissed if I actually had a legitimate case, and I had this case over here distracting. Because what does it do for people that are going to be voting for someone like that? Well, fundamentally, I think all of us kind of like an underdog a little bit. And if you're getting picked on, then, well, I want to vote for the guy that's getting picked on because that's not right. And I like justice, I think. What do you guys think?
Well, I want to vote for the guy who lives in the $400 million house.
Yeah, I'll go with that too.
I want to vote for the guy that pays less taxes
Okay, yeah, pays less taxes.
instead of the guy that wants to tax me more. Well, I think that's the takeaway that I have. Guys, if you like more videos like this, thanks for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. If you're not already subscribed, smash the like button and turn on the notifications so you can see when more videos come out. Documentation, we're going to link down there below. You can do your own research. Let us know what you think.
Yeah, what do you think Mar A Lago's worth?
Is Donald Trump being unfairly prosecuted by a rogue prosecutor? Is Donald Trump not paying his fair share? Is he defrauding lenders and the state of New York for a property in Florida? You let us know what you think down below. We'd love to hear your comments. If we get some good comments, we'll do a reaction video and respond to the comments politely. All right, we'll see you in the next video. Bye.